All right. Fantastic. Oh, the host has spotlighted my video. Awesome. Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started today. So I'll do a quick intro and then turn the microphone over to our speakers. For the record, I am Mike Madison. I am a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh and the host of this Future of Law in Technology and Governance workshop series, which is sponsored by and supported by the Center for Governance and Markets at the University of Pittsburgh. So many thanks to them for facilitating this project. I'm going to do a quick intro of our speakers. We are pleased to welcome a co-author team, Felix Chang, who is a law professor at the University of Cincinnati, although this year he is visiting just a little bit north of Cincinnati at Ohio State University's Law School, and his co-author and collaborator, Erin McCabe, who is in the digital, she's going to tell us herself, but she's in the library area supporting digital research and digital scholarship at the University of Cincinnati. And for my money, their project is generally speaking at the intersection of topic modeling and law, and I will allow them to be more nuanced about what it actually consists of and so forth. But it's generally speaking in the digital humanities meets law space, which I am super excited to hear more about. It's based on, I believe, ongoing work, as well as some published work. And we'll have them explain what they've been working on for about 30 minutes. And when that wraps up, we'll have a moderated Q&A. So Erin, and Felix, welcome, thank you, and over to you.
Hi, everyone. Mike, thanks so much for having us here. It's great to be at, even if it's virtual, it's great to be at Pitt to see old friends, Peter O and Kevin Ashley. This is a work that Erin and I have been working on. I think this is the third year of our collaboration. And so it's a project that grew out of the Digital Scholarship Center at the University of Cincinnati. A few years ago, they got a couple of really large grants from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to build a platform that uses topic modeling on very, very large data sets. And topic modeling is this algorithm. It maps the statistical relationships among words within a very large corpus. And the corpus could be text, it could be a body of even visual images. And so I was one of the first partners. I'm at the College of Law at the University of Cincinnati. And just by way of background, the way I had gotten into this project was I went to our librarian to say that at the time, I was looking at the balance between antitrust and regulation, and I wanted to look at large bodies of case law to see how federal courts had balanced antitrust and sectoral regulation. So at the time, because our librarian knew that the Digital Scholarship Center had just garnered this really large grant from the Mellon Foundation, he put us together. So thus, our project was born. Now, I like to begin by setting the stage for what the challenges have been to do really big data textual analysis in the law. So traditionally, I think there have been at least three challenges. The first is that it's really hard to have a body of data that's available, that's easily extractable, that's easily utilizable. So when we begun, we thought we would go with the two large commercial databases. That was Lexis and Westlaw. They're familiar to all of us in legal education. But Lexis and Westlaw, it's like a duopoly, and they have a huge database of all cases. It took us about 9 months to try to just negotiate a license with Lexis and Westlaw, and it was really difficult. So even though we were nonprofit researchers, we wanted to negotiate a license to try to extract data. That took a long time. It's really difficult to extract data from these commercial databases. And the last challenge is that their proprietary software and algorithms, they're not very transparent about. And so they're just not really willing to share. That challenge, I think, was surmounted in part when the Caselaw Access project at Harvard Law Library came online. So I'm going to begin to share a series of web pages. And the first is the Caselaw Access project. It's this really wonderful resource. So it came online maybe about 4 years ago. Harvard Law Library partnered with the for-profit legal tech startup Rebel and its Berkman Klein Center, and they digitized almost every legal decision in virtually every US jurisdiction. So it's this huge database of cases. You see here that they have about, let's see, they have like almost 7 million unique cases. That's federal and state. And by cases, I mean unique decisions. And then they have a little under 2 million unique federal decisions. That for me is particularly important because antitrust law, it tends to be made at the federal level. There are state counterparts, the Sherman Act, but they tend not to be as influential when it comes to legal precedent. So we turned to the Caselaw Access Project. It was really easy to negotiate a license. They have APIs that allow us to download decisions in bulk, and that was really easy. One thing that I wanted to show is that the Caselaw Access Project, they have this historical trends function, which is what it looks like here. So if you click on it, you can do a historical trends analysis to see, here I may have to refresh the page, to see like the ebbs and flows of decisions as a proportion of their corpus over time. This is showing, it's not really showing that well, I don't think, but maybe I can minimize this a little bit. Okay, there we go. So this is showing the ebbs and flows of federal decisions. I had a site that was US : and then it has two terms, antitrust and regulation. So the green is regulation, the red is antitrust. It shows as a proportion of the cases in the entire corpus, that is the nearly 2 million unique federal decisions, how that has ebbed and flowed over time with these two words. So we'll see more. I'll say more about this pattern in a minute. And by the way, I think that this talk is sometimes a little technical. So if anyone has any questions whatsoever at any time, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand, and don't worry about interrupting us whatsoever. So that was the first challenge, I thought, to big data analysis of law, which is to get at a corpus of texts. And the Caselaw Access Project really solved some of that problem. Now you'll see other researchers in this growing community of computational legal analysis turning to data from the Caselaw Access Project. The second problem is that when it comes to using topic models and other types of models, sometimes it can be really difficult to translate these results into a type of visualization that's intuitively easy for us to grasp if we don't have training in data science or computer science. And I did not have that training. So the real work that Digital Scholarship Center did was that they'd created this platform that harnesses the power of topic models, but they create these visualizations that are, in addition to being really beautiful, just really useful and intuitively really easy to grasp. So now I'm going to walk you through what that platform looks like. This is their platform. They've got, you see here, different data sources, and mine is the Caselaw Access Project. So you can see that Erin and others at DSC have been collaborating with various units across the University of Cincinnati, doing all sorts of really interesting novel research. I just did a search from 1890 when the Sherman Act was enacted until 2018 for all federal decisions containing the words antitrust and regulation. So maybe just to back up one step. So what Erin ended up doing was she and others at DSC extracted two large corpora of decisions from the Caselaw Access Project. One was every federal case with the word antitrust in it, and that's about 36,000 cases. And the other is every federal case with the word regulation in it, and that's about 305,000 cases. So from these two corpora, we're able to do additional filters. And my filter here is every federal decision with the word antitrust and regulation. And you can see here this historical trends where it really began to increase after the 1970s. There was a spike, a little bit of a spike in the mid 80s, and then it dipped down a little bit, then it's come back since then. Some would say that that little dip, they might attribute it to the rise of the Chicago School and the appointment of more libertarian judges by the Reagan administration to the federal bench, who really began to shut the door on antitrust litigation. But I'll say more about that in a minute. Now, one problem that comes when you're doing this research is, you know, if you're reading through cases, you might find very quickly that this case isn't about antitrust or regulation whatsoever. It might be like a securities class action that cites extensively to antitrust precedent, because antitrust precedent, from those of you who teach civil procedure, you know it's really influential in civil procedure. But that's not really an antitrust case. So what Erin and others did at DSC was to build out this filter that can allow us to get at documents where the word count is greater within the document. And in our parlance, each document is a unique decision. So in this way, we can filter down this corpus of about 7,300 decisions to smaller and smaller increments. Okay, so that's kind of the background. And the second obstacle, which is the visualizations. Now, let me go to the visualizations. This is going to be the antitrust and regulation corpus. This is the first of 3 visualizations that I tend to turn to. And really, I used 2 visualizations extensively. This is the topic browser view. This is what Erin had generated from the work of other digital humanities scholars. Here, they credit Andrew Goldstone, but they've adapted some of the visualizations in really interesting ways. So you see that here, what we have on the right is the proportion of cases that this topic comprises within the corpus of the antitrust and regulation cases that I've filtered down to about 2,700 based on the recurrence of these terms within each decision. So very quickly, by way of nomenclature, the topic is comprised of the top terms that the topic modeling algorithm finds tend to cohere. And then if you click on each topic, you can see the top documents, and these are the top decisions, or the decisions that are most likely to have the top terms within each of the topics. So just to back up to this view a little bit, you see not only on the right the proportion of the corpus that each topic comprises, but also over time, how it's ebbed and flowed over time. And for me, this is particularly interesting because you see inevitably over time, you see the rise of topic 1, which is this increase of class actions and a topic where you see a lot of civil procedure terms in here. And that shows perhaps the rise over time of antitrust class actions. You see the diminution over time by contrast at topic 11. And that makes sense for antitrust scholars as well, because the top terms here are like commission and rate. And that's a signal to us that this is this really old doctrine of rate regulation in antitrust, which is the old paradigm of regulating a natural monopoly was to subject them to really intensive regulation so that under the filed rate doctrine, they had to set rates. And if they wanted to depart from the rates, they'd have this kind of open hearing. That's how the sectoral regulators used to govern natural monopolies. But over time, through this process that we colloquially known as deregulation, over time, the sectoral regulators have kind of stopped regulating that intensively and just set the baseline or the ground rules for competition. Now, one view that's really helpful that Erin and others had generated is the stacked view, which shows the proportion over time much more clearly in these color-coded topics where you can see. And I think that's particularly helpful. Now, one criticism that oftentimes happens with topic modeling in particular, but also within digital humanities about these types of tools is decontextualization. And that's perhaps the third obstacle, which is the lack of context. Kind of the precursor for what the computational legal analysis circle is doing is there was corpus linguistics, this movement that happened over the last decade. You had some proponents, you had a really prominent state Supreme Court judge in Utah and others who were thinking through statutory interpretation by counting words, for instance, or going to trying to figure out, say, that what the common understanding of certain terms is to try to get at statutory interpretation. Now, some of the criticisms that's flowed from that kind of corpus linguistics approach track some of the criticisms that you see in digital humanities, which is this extreme decontextualization that happens with these tools. And these tools and topic modeling isn't immune to this criticism. It can really tend to decontextualize things over time. So as a solution to that, Erin and others at DSC have now generated this model of models view, or this multi-level view, where it does 2 things. So one, it aggregates your topics into topic clusters to get up more of a big picture context. And at the smaller end, there's a document retrieval function, which is really useful too, so that you can begin to read through the top documents within a topic to try to figure out if you have any aberrant results. And this is that multi-level view. There are 3 different multi-level views. This is the tree view, and that shows very clearly some of these topic clusters. So this is what is in antitrust immunity topic cluster. And then you can see here some of the top topics within that cluster, and clicking on that should get you, sometimes you can get the top terms. And what's useful here is in the right, you see the cluster number, the number of decisions or documents within that cluster, the number of topics that's subsumed within that cluster, and the top terms. I think this is particularly helpful because it shows that in a lot of the antitrust corpora that we've looked at, the vocabulary or the clusters tend to break down by sector. So you'll always see here, it makes sense in the antitrust and regulation. It talks about antitrust immunity. You'll see a procedural sector. You see a health sector. You'll see there's always a milk sector here. And I think the reason somebody told me who had worked at the DOJ is that in the 1970s and 80s, the DOJ had brought a lot of cases against producers of milk powder and milk formula for price fixing. Here you see there's an insurance cluster, an energy cluster, a telecom cluster, a banking securities cluster, a labor cluster. I think that's really helpful because it shows us that the terminology tends to track, it tends to divide by sectors. Now, this is a circle view, which shows the terms, the clusters that they tend to occur in. And recently what Erin and I have started to do is we started to look more at the network cluster. Now, this is a network visualization where it's kind of in this vector space. What is particularly helpful is there's this document link that shows you that where we can adjust the density of connections. So here, if we adjust the doc link, we see that the top connections begin to occur within a cluster. That makes sense, right? That the terminology is going to be shared within the cluster. But there's this theory from network theory called the strength of weak ties. And Erin and I have really been thinking about this, which is as you scale this doc link, where you begin to see where the initial connections emerge, those connections across clusters are particularly interesting to us to see if there's borrowings of terminology or doctrine from one cluster to another. And maybe in the last minute that I have left, I'll just show you what this looks like in another corpus. So this is antitrust and market power. In antitrust, market power is particularly a difficult and thorny concept. And in this topic browser view, we see over time this diminution of a tying topic, and tying is difficult to prove over time. As tying jurisprudence has become more complicated, it seems that courts are hearing less tying cases. Maybe that means that plaintiffs aren't bringing them as much. Maybe it means it's going to settle more. But you see this increase, as you did in the antitrust regulation corpus, of these procedure-related topics. It tends to show a rise in perhaps civil litigation. This is what the antitrust and market power corpus looks like in the multi-level view. And this is what it looks like in network view. And as we begin to see some of the initial connections, this is what that looks like. So here, I think I'm going to pause. I will stop sharing. I think there are lots of comments and questions. Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop sharing and pause and turn things over to Erin.
Thank you so much, Felix. I think as a non-lawyer or legal scholar, I'm going to kind of talk about my experience with this project from obviously the more technical side. As Felix mentioned, he was really one of our early adopters, and our platform, which is in a never-ending state of development, has really benefited from some of this case law work. And so I'm going to kind of talk about some of the lessons learned from that technical aspect as well. I'm going to actually share my screen as well. Like I said, I'm going to talk mostly, how do I hide this thing? I'm going to talk mostly about or I'm mostly mapped to kind of a broad strokes research process approach, just to organize my thoughts a little here. So I won't go too much into data collection since Felix already covered a lot of the case law perks. But I would just say that as a librarian info nerd, I do think this whole process really benefits from shifting your thought of data collection to data curation. It's a lot more critical of a term and really starts the whole research process off on this foundation of like critically considering your data set and the language it contains. And again, as a librarian, I have to, just applaud case law's accessibility. I have used it to teach, APIs 101 to library students and Python 101 situations who are just starting to learn how to access APIs. And case law is so clean and accessible. It's a tool I use just to demonstrate that. And then lastly, and then I'll stop being a commercial for Case Law Access Project, but one of the perks too is the Case Law Limerick generator, which is super fun, but also, despite being maybe less than academically important, is useful in the way that it starts people who are maybe not always working in a linguistic realm to start thinking about language more critically or just in a different way. So I think that's beneficial and also just nice when you need a quick break from, whatever you're working on. So I would say the next step in this kind of broad strokes approach to our research process would be model evaluation. And the DSC really has this ethos of combined human and machine evaluation. So a lot of times in the AI realms, there's my dog in the background. A lot of times in the AI realms, people rely on a lot of different machine generated model evaluation metrics, things like coherence evaluations. What we do at the DSC is we really try to yoke that together with human evaluations. So, Felix helping us with his subject matter expertise and really relying on the discipline subject matter experts to help us kind of combine the best of machines with the best of human analysis. So this is kind of the division of labor broadly that I think of when we talk about that human machine calibration. So humans, we use our subject matter experts to kind of do a general sense making assessment of models. And I think it's exorbitantly more important in the case law realm, since the language is so wildly different, wildly unique, and hyper structured, and really specific language uses. You really need subject matter expertise to do a lot of that evaluation. And then we also use humans to kind of help us identify some stop words. Typically, when I work with researchers, I suggest against using stop words to kind of willy-nilly style. I don't want people to think everything is a stop word. But in case law, I have to say that we use way more stop words than any other data set because of that procedural language and its heavy presence in the data set. The only thing I would kind of monologue about that is that before removing any stop words from your model's analysis, we do still encourage to take note of where they're absent from in the model. So if you see certain words appearing in every single topic, maybe that's less interesting, but if they don't appear in two topics, maybe their absence should be noted from those. And yeah, like I said, endemic and procedural language that Felix talked about a bit, that's really dominant in case law, and having worked with all sorts of data sets from all sorts of disciplines and sources, I've never seen such a strong presence of that kind of data set endemic language as you see it with case law. So we really need some subject matter experts to help us evaluate some initial models before we get into specific analysis at that stage. On the machine side of that, we do run topic coherence scores. Topic coherence is really a metric to just assess the semantic similarity of words in a topic. So that is crucial to have. It kind of maps to that sense making that humans will do. But there's some critique in the NLP world of the value of coherence scores. It can be somewhat controversially applied. So what we do at the DSC is we kind of yoke that to the human subject matter expert evaluation, and we just calibrate together. So we will use topic coherence scores as a way to narrow down a selection of models that have value for a given data set, and then turn that over to human subject matter experts so that they can pick from a narrowed down range of models. We also have found that certain of these behaviors exist on a more data set level type of evaluation. So it's not necessarily that your coherence scores are specific to your antitrust and regulation model. It's that these coherence scores are just kind of the characteristic of all case law models. So having model metrics behave according to this somewhat speech community rather than at the specific data set level is useful to know. And we've kind of found that out through working with case law so excessively. And yeah, so some things we found out from that are that case law in general, no matter what models we run from case law data sets, topic coherence is just higher than, or topic coherence scores higher at lower topic counts than other data sets, specifically PubMed abstracts for an example case. So a lot of Felix's models will be run at, 10, 15, maybe 20 for some of the higher document data set models, but usually in that 15 topic range. That seems to be the most successful, both in terms of the topic coherence score and Felix's evaluation of that. We also have some starts at network evaluations. Felix mentioned we're kind of moving to that visualization of the model and how we can evaluate that from a metric standpoint. So things like density and centrality are helpful. So when I say density, we also see in case law, density is higher across all case law models than other data sets. And my thought about this is that it might just be an artifact of strict citation rules or precedents, or just that endemic language that structures a lot of the procedural components of a language model for case law as well. And then centrality too reflects that endemic language kind of issue with case law, where we have a lot of the most central nodes topics in the data set or in the case law models will be kind of that endemic language. So you can see here when I say central, I don't mean central geographically. I mean central in terms of a topic node's capacity to connect to other topic nodes across the network. So if we're looking at this model, I'm using this topic node as an example of one that's more central than this one. They both have edges to other nodes, other topics in the model, but this one has a lot more edges. And in our case, these edges represent shared documents. So this node and this node, these two topics occur in at least 890 documents together. So those topics co-occur in 890 cases. And we can tinker with this too until it becomes totally illegible or as a way of finding kind of those first connections too. But yeah, like I said, a lot of these first connections, these strongest connections, are with more procedural types of language and are maybe less interesting or less informative than some of the weaker connections, which get to more of the less procedural, more content specific type of connections that are being made in case law data sets. Okay.
Hi, can I ask one
Yes.
question about that?
Yes, please.
What did the density
Yes,
exactly?
that's a great question. So for our networks, this is going to get a little mathematical, but for our networks, they are weighted, which means these edges have a weight. So, you know, this one might be 890 and this one will be 100, whatever it might be. So we want to account for that. So essentially you can think of density like the average edge weight of all the possible edges in the network.
So it's an overall net.
Yeah.
Metric.
Yeah. Density is an overall network metric.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and I would say too, I think I might have mentioned this, but case law has a higher density than our other data sets for sure. Like notably across all case law models, they're always denser than our other data sets models.
Erin, we have one other question as well.
Yeah,
it's in the chat from
you.
Allison. So Allison asks, what are nodes and edges?
So nodes.
No. Let me. Sorry.
Yeah,
I was typing that as you were talking. I thought the nodes here were words, but they're topics. My actual question is, now that I understand better what this represents, is where's your cutoff on the topics? Like, is it the top 20 words? Is it the top 100 words?
Yeah, actually, so in the visualization itself, we use top 10 words for the topic clusters. But technically, if you go all the way deep into all of the things that the algorithm is considering, all words have some probability of occurring in a topic.
Well, all the topics are all the words. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
The probability distribution can go all the way down to 0.000000000 whatever.
Right. So how did you come up with 10? It's just the
10 is a visual cutoff.
Okay.
But if you go into a tree, you can get, maybe you can only get 10 in the tree as well. But yeah, we kind of cut it off at 10 for, I don't know, everyone else's sake, legibility sake, and you know, that kind of thing. And also we have cutoffs in the visualization. So all the edges are documents that have at least 0.01%. So there's cutoffs there as well that are intentionally pretty low because we want to cut as wide as possible. Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, that's some beginning evaluations of some of the network stuff. We're still kind of finding our way through that. But some of these patterns come up in the analysis stage as well. So the fact that some of these patterns exist at a data set level is really beneficial to analysis for a couple different reasons. One is we can make some of these modeling decisions, these like fine tuning our parameters at the data set level, which is especially helpful when we're doing the exploratory work at the beginning of our research project, where we're running iterations and iterations of models, and we're not necessarily wanting to stop and run coherence scores for all of them. We might not use all of them. We're just kind of going through this iterative exploratory stage. So making kind of modeling decisions at that broad level, and then once we find the models we specifically want to, getting more specific at that point. It also helps us easily identify variations. So if we know case law typically behaves with this type of density, and then we see one model just drop its density altogether, that kind of tells us something about that specific model, that it's so different from other case law models. And I think sometimes that just means we need to change the words we're using for a data set. We might be using too broad of language to narrow our question, or it might be a specific area of legal research that is just a little less stratified. But either of those are interesting findings. And then, like I said before, it really does take the pressure off the metrics and kind of allows us to incorporate that more humanistic lens as well. The downside, or maybe I don't want to call them downside, but the kind of hiccups of some of these patterns, as they apply to case law, is that the significantly higher levels of procedural language can kind of cloud more targeted research. So if we're looking at this network viz, and we're looking at, the most dominant or the most prominent topic clusters, if that is procedural language, then it kind of can skew the visibility of the other topics because it's taking so much weight and skewing everything. That skewing isn't inaccurate, but it is trickier to manipulate a visualization by that in that way. The other thing, and this is maybe an Erin specific problem, but it has a very high access barrier, the language of case law. So I have worked for academic data sets outside my field in a lot of different research projects, but I'm typically able to offer researchers some initial kind of broader analysis notes at the outset of a project. But case law language really requires a lot more work from Felix to do the analysis because it's so specific and so far outside other language communities. So yeah, it just requires a lot more commitment from the subject matter expert to take on some of those analysis things. But I think overall, all of these kind of patterns of case law at the data set level, all the things about case law's kind of cultural language practices, getting our way to understanding what those are through metrics and human analysis and models really helps us kind of prop up the end result, the end analysis. So it's all useful information to get through. And the last kind of step, I guess, in the research project is about circulation, whether that means publications like Felix has written or these presentations. And I think every discipline seems to have their own challenges with this. As we talked about already, data accessibility is kind of unique in that space. A lot of things are really walled in. And then also kind of pedagogy, general data or tech practices are becoming more kind of foundational knowledge for legal scholars, but there's still some kind of barriers to understanding or accessing AI tools. Our platform is has as its goals, one of its goals is to kind of lower that threshold, that access barrier. But I think that's kind of where I want to leave it with everyone in the audience today, because something to think about. I'm interested in hearing your opinions on how to kind of make this more accessible, more usable, all of that. Sure, I'm over time, so I'll stop my sharing now, but that's everything.
So
Okay.
we're happy to take any questions.
Yeah.
Well, so as your moderator, let me just, while people think about whether they have questions they want to raise, this has been like really interesting and illuminating stuff. So I just want to thank you. It's not often that I go to an academic presentation and really have my mind expanded in such a substantial way. So I'm really enthusiastic about this. I have lots of questions, but let me step back and ask if others have questions about the technical aspects of this or the interpretive aspects of it or any feature of it, because we've got a group of people that is pretty broadly represents a pretty broad spectrum of subject matter interest and methodological interest. So I think Erin and Felix are ready to answer just about anything having to do with what this.
I saw one in the chat I can quickly address. It's
Okay.
about how many requests our platform gets for adding different corpora. And if we have ways to field requests. And we have, as part of our Mellon grant, we have kind of sub grants that we can offer to researchers at our institution. We have people write a one-page, proposal. Really, it's not an excessive grant process. It's just a one-page explanation of what your data is and what you hope to get from it. We get a lot of requests. We kind of grade them on if we have a lot of diverse disciplines. Like we're trying to work across the campus. So we like to not just work with law or medicine, but everything in between. So we try to have a wide academic disciplinary reach. But yeah, that 1-page kind of review process is nice. And yeah, probably more requests than we can potentially work with. But as the platform gets a little more streamlined in its development, we can offer people, if not full grant money or support, we can at least host their data for them and give them some initial, guidelines for how to read it. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Allison asked the question that was very high on my list, which is how can people outside the University of Cincinnati environment take advantage of this great work that you've been doing? Let me go back, if I might, to the last theme that you mentioned when you talked about introducing some of these skills and platforms to students into the pedagogy of the field. And when you from my standpoint here at Pittsburgh, I would say that's a very optimistic ambition. We are a couple of generations of students beyond educating faculty about the potential for this stuff, let alone students. So I'm sort of curious between the two of you, whether, Felix, for example, you've introduced any of this stuff to your students in any initial or advanced context, and if so, kind of what reaction and uptake?
I have not, but that's probably just me. I mean, I've found that the barriers to them learning this, it's just kind of high, and I would have to spend too much time. I just found this to be much more efficient when I run questions directly to Erin, or if there's something I don't get, I'll just play around with the topics myself. I kind of feel like it's inevitable though, Mike. I feel like we're gonna have to introduce some of this stuff eventually. My colleague Tim Armstrong, whom you already know, teaches Python to law students. I think that's a good start. But like every year there are newer startups in legal tech that are promising to do legal research more efficient, more quickly, more intuitively. So I think that it's a real failing of law schools if we can't keep up with that innovation. I can't quite figure out how to plug them in. But Erin and I have talked a couple of times about maybe getting law students. I do have a colleague, Janet Moore, who's gotten some law students involved, but I think it's more to maybe to read decisions as a back-end check to make sure that there aren't too many aberrant results.
Follow quickly on that point, which is at several points during the presentation, you talked about the risks of this kind of approach, sort of decontextualizing the content and the need to sort of use this to augment sort of humanistic interpretive skills or blending sort of traditional analysis with computationally motivated analysis. And so there's a substantive question that I think then feeds back into the pedagogical note that you just drew, which is from Felix's standpoint, in what respects, if any, have the results of your research in this space so far sort of changed what you expected to see in the antitrust regulatory world had you stuck with more conventional, traditional legal analysis techniques?
The one thing that's really changed is just to think about what's relevant and what should count as precedent. In the common law tradition, and especially in antitrust, we have a very clear view of what precedent is. But in going to topic modeling, the mathematical definition of relevant is really different. And so the top decisions within any topic, some of them are expected, but some of them are not. Some of them are lower level decisions in some district court that mathematically has a lot of these terms, but they don't have that much precedential value. I mean, they're cited by other, by the district courts, other decisions within maybe that jurisdiction, but they don't seem to have a whole lot of precedential value. So it's really gotten me to think hard about what precedent means, and it's gotten me to think harder about the gatekeepers of Lexis and Westlaw being really intransparent of how their algorithms define what's really important, whether that steers our behavior and our understanding of what's precedential or not.
Interesting. The other thing that related to that, because Westlaw and Lexis, so when you were talking about your process of starting by approaching LexisNexis and Westlaw to license their content, and you eventually got to Ravel. And there was a lot of, remember when Ravel got started, there was a lot of controversy and litigation over whether they were entitled to scrape content out of Lexis and Westlaw. There's a whole domain of legal tech, legal information providers now. And I wonder if you had not ended up with the Caselaw Access Project, but you had partnered with a different source, whether the corpora would look a little bit different, and therefore the models that you built out of it might be influenced as a result. So it's not that Caselaw Access Project is unbiased, it's simply shaped in a somewhat different way. I'm just sort of brainstorming out or thinking out loud about some of the different nuances of how you got to where you are and what they imply.
I think it would look different. Erin can speak much more to that about the seeds of generating the visualization. So if we'd partnered with somebody else that, Lexis and Westlaw, if they had head notes, for instance, these are the synopsis of the decisions that get roped into the terms that might have shaped the terms. I have no doubt that it would have changed things. The data from the Caselaw Access Project is pretty good and pretty clean. The other thing is they don't try to be, unlike these other legal texts, they don't try to be like predict judicial results, which is where a lot of what the legal tech startups are coming from. And I think that may be problematic. I think that may be problematic, not least because people who do this sort of empirical work always caution against making predictions. But I'll stop and let Erin answer.
Yeah, no, I think maybe it was Janet or maybe it was you, Felix, who shared with me an article about running the same searches across different legal databases and the results being different.
That was Susan Nibble,
month to month,
Susan Mart at Colorado did this. She ran searches across six big databases, six different results.
And I think too, because we don't know what is factoring into those decisions, we don't have a good way to evaluate what the resulting data set would be. With Caselaw, it's much more straightforward. We pulled based on, does this word exist in this document somewhere? But I think where that might seem too broad, but I would say for Felix's thing, we like to cut wide, if we can. It's free, so we can cut wide. We can cut wide and then narrow within that based on these other techniques that Felix talked about and kind of, go in there. So, yeah.
Great. So we've got Sasha and then Peter. Sasha, go.
Well, I have a bit of a long-winded question. I'll let Peter go first.
Oh, okay. Peter?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Felix.
Hi, Peter.
My apologies for not revealing myself, but I am literally and figuratively in a dark place right now.
Okay.
I'm in my basement and trying to multitask while doing some treadmill work and at the same time listening to this really fascinating project. I have tons of questions, but I'm just going to restrict it just to one. And I think it's probably directed perhaps to Erin, which is I know very little about the specific technologies that's used for this natural language sort of machine learning approach to analyzing different types of documents. But I am aware, I think, that there is a variation or a range of different kinds of methodologies. And so just as a point of reference, then my understanding is that there are all kinds of sort of private equity firms that are using this type of technology to go into securities filings and extracting all kinds of information. And so my understanding, though, is that the approach that they are using is somewhat different than what is being used here for the Caselaw project. And so I wonder, Erin, if you could talk a little bit about some of the different kinds of paradigmatic ways that you can think about the universe of technologies that are being used right now to extract information from a variety of different sources in the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't speak to the SEC project specifically that you mentioned, but I do know that the foundational algorithm of all of our visualizations is LDA topic modeling. And topic modeling is really just looking at its own data set. for a lot of more advanced language models, they're pre-training a language model on some already extant language data set. And that's why companies like Amazon or Google are really good at doing that, because they have access to all the information on the internet and in, bottomless wallet, and in unlimited server space. But things like, these generative language models or GPT-3, they're really trained on all the language of the internet, or, if it's more specific, all the legal language of some realm. But yeah, so they can kind of train models on this, and then that gives the model just more information than a topic model is looking to do. A topic model is really just about dividing your specific data set. It's not referencing other data sets or other legal knowledge in any data capacity. So that would be my guess about what some of the kind of private companies are accessing, trained legal models. And some of that work is done quasi-manually as well, where you have cases that are tagged by humans as related to this or related to this or related to this. And then they feed that human training into a machine so that it learns more and more and more. So yeah, that's, I think, probably next wave of stuff. And as data gets more accessible, or I think you'll always be a little behind, some of the bigger companies, but just because of money and, server power. But yeah, I think that's kind of the next level of language evaluation, is these pre-trained language models.
Great. Sasha.
I'm sorry.
Erin, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good. You're good.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sasha?
Okay. Hi to Peter. It's been a long time. Michael, I think we met once upon a time when I was in Pittsburgh, seeing you. So I was super interested in this talk because I am doing something very similar. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm a cyber guy. And I have a project where I am trying to collect the universe of cyber stalking cases. I'm also doing the same thing for computer hacking, but the methods are the same. So DOJ has an interest in understanding how many of these federal cases are there, period. They don't know. And so our first task is to figure out how many of these cases are there. And then once we know what they are, to collect the filings, the PACER documents, the complaints and indictments, and see what we can do using natural language processing or other techniques to code them at scale. So if you had a team of RAs, you would collect these documents and you would do it manually. And we were trying to figure out what is the state of the art in doing this programmatically, I guess. And so it's, you all were applying topic modeling to decisions. And so given the set of cases that I guess, as I understood, that you had available to you from case.law. And so that's, kind of the same as what we're doing. Now, for those interested, we were able to collect the universe and be able to identify the universe of these federal criminal cases from the Federal Judicial Center. So they have a database, their IDB data, right? And it is amazing. It is a godsend, right? So I can query and I can find every case related to 18 USC 2261A. Now it's not perfect because there's the coding errors, but whatever, I can figure that out. And then I can go using APIs to court listener. So I didn't know actually case.law existed. I'm sure I had come across it, but I never solidified that as a data source for me. I could have gone to PACER directly, but I didn't have kind of the case ID, but I could recreate it. I'm able to recreate it from from the core records. Anyway, that's a long way of saying that sort of we developed sort of Python scripts to use the APIs from Court Listener to collect available documents, and for those that we didn't, to go buy them off of Pacer. So it's not quite like at a press of a button, but sort of at a press of a button, where we can identify the universe of cases, find all of the documents that are freely available, and for those for which you have to pay for, go and collect them. But the probably more interesting point for all of you is what can we do with natural language processing on these documents? I had an interest in figuring out what variables, what features of these cases were interesting. So for me, notions of, there were cyber stalking, right? So what kinds of technologies were being used, right? I wanted to go through all of those cases, all those filings, and figure out, is there GPS, is there surveillance, are there kind of anonymizing remailers or whatever? And that sort of looks a lot like topic analysis, right? Of topic modeling. Now, we didn't end up sort of going that route, but we sure could have to produce the nice visualizations. And I wonder if going forward, so I'm further along in that project for the cyber stalking, less farther along with the computer hacking, but I really have an interest in understanding what are the general cases, like what are the archetypes of computer hacking cases? Are they all national security, Iran trying to hack into whatever? Are they China trying to steal intellectual property? Are they sort of Russian malware people trying to sell and exploit vulnerabilities or whatever? Is it company on company stealing information? What is it? What do they generally look like? And I can do a bit of that, myself, right, with Python tools, with Spacey and Prodigy and stuff that seems to be the bread and butter of NLP in Python. But hearing you talk, understanding more of the tools and the visualization, I wonder if that's an opportunity to understand, like, generally the characteristics of these cases, if that's sort of possible. So that's sort of a long-winded story. But what you've described has encouraged me that, first of all, there are other people doing similar kind of research in this area, because I sure haven't found a whole lot of literature. But it's been nice to hear the different approaches that you all take.
Yeah, I think you're right. Your instinct is right that topic modeling could help you kind of uncover some of the major themes once you have your whole data set curated. Mm-hmm. One thing that we don't have on our platform, but I've done for other projects too, that might be helpful is, once I have a topic model built out, I kind of bend it backwards onto itself so that I have a document and then a distribution of topics in that one document. So I can see each document in my data set's kind of unique topic thumbprint, if you will. And that might be a step closer to what you mean. I'm not entirely sure I grasp all the parameters of your research question, but I think that could be, using topic modeling to get some of the strong themes, and then using that theme map to chart out a thumbprint for each document in your data set.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to that, my reactions are, I think topic modeling can show you the bigger themes. There are other research questions that I'd be really interested in. I don't know who you'd have to pair up with, maybe economists, maybe to see the repeat offenders when it comes to the stalking, maybe to see what jurisdictions you tend to see more types of what cases. When it comes to hacking, exactly those questions to see what's the bulk of the computer hacking cases that's actually, cases that are actually filed and brought to the attention of the authorities, as opposed to what's getting most of the oxygen in the news. So there are a number of research questions. I'm not quite sure either what.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. The other thing we found is that while I had very high hopes for NLP, for this coding, right? I was sort of hoping, cross my fingers a little bit, I was sort of hoping that I could throw Python at these documents and have it magically code all the great stuff that I wanted to, given a code book that I would have created. And I was wrong. It took an awful lot of fiddling and more fiddling and more fiddling and more fiddling. And at the end of the day, now there were 450 cases, right? Like this wasn't huge, certainly wasn't big data. It would have been easier to just do it all by hand. Now that's not going to work for thousands of cases and whatever. But I was surprised at just how fickle, right? Even with the beautiful pipeline that it creates from the NLP stuff, even the tokenization of the words and all of the kind of categorization and labeling that it does, there's just so much context that seemed to be required. Now, maybe I was doing it wrong, but there was so much context that was required and so much fiddling and trying to suss out the nuance of, did the offender appear in physical, like was there physical instance of stalking too, or physical threats in addition to, just sort of cyber threats, that we ended up kind of pulling back and pulling back and pulling back on the specifics of what we wanted, right? Just to say, right? And that was hard. It was a good lesson.
Yeah, can I quickly interject? We're going to wrap it up here in a second, but Sasha, your question evokes something that was in the back of my mind as Felix and Erin were presenting, which is that the project that they're working on, which focused on antitrust. Antitrust is a well-defined legal domain.
Yes.
So you construct a set of words, even if it's just antitrust regulation, and you've got kind of a natural set of boundaries that comes with that legal concept. Stalking is not a well-defined legal domain. Hacking is also not a well-defined legal domain. So if you start wandering into, like, kids capture all of the complaints or reported decisions that encompass hacking, you have a pretty broad array of types of cases in terms of legal domain because of how those things are characterized at different points in time, by different lawyers, by different courts. And it's kind of an iterative process because you start with one set of coded words, collect a bunch of cases, parse those, code those, and then discover that you need to do another tranche because some creative lawyers have kind of expanded the scope of all that, which is, I think, doable over time. You sort of build the model in a recursive way, but when you start with hacking as your category, that's a fact pattern, not a legal concept.
To be clear, I've got a federal statute. Like I've got 1030 to go off of.
Okay, well, so CFAA, right? So
yeah.
Right, yeah. But what's interesting is that even by trying to define the world of CFAA prosecutions, as somebody who's written a lot about that from a traditional legal analysis standpoint, what you discover pretty quickly is that you wander into adjacent fields of law, which actually represent very, very closely analogous fact patterns and public policy problems, but for a variety of reasons weren't actually prosecuted as CFAA matters. But there's a little bit of that in antitrust law too, but I suspect less. So I think what Erin and Felix have done to me as a lawyer is like, this is proof of concept. Using a reasonably well-defined domain, there are several more layers to explore. And Sasha, your experience illustrates some of the challenges associated with really trying to do this in a more nuanced, sophisticated way. So
proof of concept is a good way to put it.
Yeah. So I think we need to call a conclusion to today, but maybe the conversation can carry on separately. I hope it does. Erin and Felix, thank you so much for this. This has been tremendous. I'm really happy that we were able to schedule this and pull this off, even with like sort of a concise or closed group, but it was a group of really interested folks. So thank you, Valerie. Thank you for being here. She's our speaker next month, so here from a different point of view, but obviously observing carefully what's going on. Brian, thank you for moderating and keeping the recording live. We can shut that off now. Thank you as well. And we'll look forward to staying in touch, everyone.